Your Honor, we'd like to call Dr. David Spiegel. Dr.
What?
Spiegel?
So they feed him information with some missing. Then
All right,
this
that's
guy
fine,
thinks that
sir.
somebody slams his finger into some door hinge, throws it in the bar, bleeds in there, runs out of the room. The butler picks it up. Guy goes to the hospital and makes up a complete new story to fix his own finger. If you're in the jury, dude. No, literally, don't say question mark. That is literally the way that they're trying to frame this as is. That is the most. That would be the closest potential scenario that happened from their end, right? Crushing, squeezed, pull from a door hinge. Then the finger is found at the bar across the fucking hall or across the fucking room. I don't know. Also, the guy is fed. Like, I don't get it. There's something that I don't like about this is that I get it. You're a witness and you're paid for one person. Once you're finally on the stand and as a witness and you're giving answers, why is he so adamant not to lose? That he said some shit that doesn't really make sense. Almost like he's like the information where he says, "Oh, dude, the finger was flat." No, dude. The tip of the fingers were off the fucking off the thing, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I mean, I did say that." But dude, that's important though. Because the reason why this is so important, okay? Listen, unless tell me if I misheard or not. Okay, this is very, very important. What the fuck is this? Is this new paint? What the fuck is this garbage? Hello? Okay, is that table here like this, right? And he says that the fingers were like this, correct? Like this, right? And in his testimony, he says that it doesn't really make sense for him if it's from the dorsal top that the injury goes like this, is cutting under, right? That's kind of what he's saying, right? At the beginning, that was his testimony. That technically, you wouldn't have, if it's coming from the dorsal, an undercut on the underbelly like that. That is what he's trying to say initially, right? But then he's reminded that the fingers were said to be like this, off the table, right? Which would literally immediately explain that it could happen based on the height of the finger that the bottle did cut the underbelly of it, because it's not shielded by the table anymore. It's hanging completely. But he acts like, in my opinion, he acts like this is like a non-factor to the case. Like, oh yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, you're right. It was a little bit like off the table, whatever. When it is an extreme big deal to the two scenarios that he's trying to present, this one and that one, this one becoming disregarded, right? That's my problem with this guy's testimony. That's my problem. Is that he makes a big deal out of the hand being face down, right? Which shields the underbelly of the finger from being cut by a bottle or whatever. And then when he was presented with this information, he kind of like dismisses it or whatever. I feel like dude. Why risk your career for this? I don't get it. Why risk your career for this? It doesn't make sense at all. Unless you're telling me that what I was saying is wrong, just tell me, because that's because I'm a dumbass. We need to realize that most people in life are dumbasses like me. Average Joe. Okay? So which means that the jury is also probably mostly dumbasses like I'm a dumbass. So if that's what I understand, I would assume that's what they understand, at least on average.
Thank you.
All right.
That's a
You're
problem.
going to be sworn.
You solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case in penalty of law.
Oh, thanks, Jeg. Gentlemen, thanks for paying attention. Oh, fuck my
Thank you,
shit.
Your Honor.
Oh my.
Will you please tell the jury your full name and business address?
David R. Spiegel. I'm a physician. I work at 825 Fairfax Avenue in Norfolk, Virginia, as part of the Eastern Virginia Medical School.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a physician psychiatrist.
And where do you work? Do you work at?
I work at Eastern Virginia. I'm employed by Eastern Virginia Medical
It's a
School, but I
shame.
also work at Norfolk General Hospital, which is the teaching hospital in Norfolk.
How many years have you been practicing as a psychiatrist?
I entered residency in 1989. I graduated residency in 1993. So from 1993 to today, I've been in physician practicing.
That's almost 30
That's 30 years, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Please describe for the jury the nature of your clinical practice.
So my clinical practice is comprised of both inpatient care at Norfolk General Hospital, as well as my outpatient practice at Eastern Virginia Medical School. About 85 to 90% of my day is clinical between the two components.
And what is involved in a comprehensive
I'm just
evaluation?
kidding.
So in a comprehensive evaluation, in addition to reviewing historical information that you receive from collateral other sources, you undertake a history from the patient. You get whether it's the history of current illness, the past psychiatric history, family history, social history,
sorry.
legal, substance history. Then you do what's called a mental status exam, which is the psychiatric version of the physical exam, where you're actually giving a description of what you see in front of you. Then you can do cognitive testing, which tests the patient memory, attention, concentration, etc. Then you come up with a working and a differential diagnosis, describe any other additional testing you may need or not need, and then you come up with a treatment plan.
How many patients have you treated over the 30 years?
Quite a lot, probably in the tens of thousands.
Oh, wow.
And how many patients do you regularly see?
So inpatient is generally about 5 to 8, sometimes more. Outpatients probably 5 to 6, sometimes more. I should point out that my inpatient work is divided between consultation, psychiatry, and I believe we're going to talk about that, as well as working on the inpatient service. So I believe we will talk about that.
What, if any, differences are there on how many patients you see on weekends as
Script
opposed to
handy.
weekdays?
So when I'm on call, which is on either a Saturday or a Sunday meeting, I have to be in the hospital and around. That's probably an additional 35 plus patients.
How frequently do you treat patients who abuse drugs and alcohol?
Unfortunately, drugs and alcohol are part of psychiatric practice. And so probably 3/4 of my patients have substance abuse problems.
Does this include both legal and illegal drugs?
Yes, put them both together, probably 75%.
And how frequently do you treat patients who have suffered from someone in their lives who abuses alcohol and drugs?
On a regular basis, like I said, on a daily basis. This is part of what psychiatry is.
Okay. And as part of that treatment of patients who abuse drugs and alcohol, do you evaluate the impact of the abuse on their brains and personal interactions with others?
Yes, substance of abuse, both in the short term and the long term, can affect the brain in terms of mood, behavior, cognition, meaning attention, concentration, memory, ability to control your behavior, as well as your overall level of functioning. It can affect it in the short term, such as alcoholic blackouts. It can affect it by causing stroke, such as stimulants can. And so at the end of the day, it's a rather lengthy list of what substance abuse can do to the human brain.
Dr. Spiegel, how frequently have you treated patients who have suffered intimate partner violence?
Again, it's very unfortunate that probably 50% of my patients suffer from trauma. If I had to guess of those 50%, probably 25% of my practice is people who have suffered intimate partner violence.
And how consistent is that with the national average?
In America, unfortunately, it's about 20 to 25%, depending on the study of women have complained, have reported intimate partner violence.
And how frequently have you treated patients who have perpetrated the intimate partner violence?
So again, in the outpatient setting, I don't see it quite as much, but in the inpatient setting, again, it's a really relative common phenomena that we'll see perpetrators of partner violence. And, you know, they're patients who need treatment too.
And overall, how many patients have you treated who have been perpetrators of intimate partner violence?
Perpetrators?
Yes.
Probably 5 to 10% of the patients I do is perpetrators.
And would you say tens of thousands over the 30 years?
Yes.
And leading.
Overruled. Thank you. As part of treating patients relating to intimate partner violence, do you regularly evaluate these patients?
Do I regularly evaluate the patient?
Evaluate the patient, yes.
Oh, yes. Yes, regularly. I mean, they get the same comprehensive evaluation
I won't say
that I described before.
Are you licensed in Virginia?
Yes, I am.
And when did you first become licensed in Virginia?
1993.
Have you been qualified by courts as an expert witness?
Yes, I have.
In how many states have you been qualified as an expert?
3, which would be Virginia, Maryland, and South Carolina.
Dr. Spiegel, can you please review for the jury your educational background beginning with your undergraduate studies?
So I went to Duke University undergrad. I went to medical school at the State University of New York Health Science Center in Brooklyn, formerly known as Downstate Medical Center. I did my internship and residency between Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center and Penn State Hershey Medical Center.
No more, I'm done.
And-
This is jokes.
And I'm also fellowship board certified in consultation liaison psychiatry.
Okay. And where did you do your residency and your internships?
So I did my residency for Penn State and internship at Dartmouth.
Okay. And what is your current title and position?
So I am the acting chair, endowed chair, and professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Eastern Virginia Medical School.
Are you board certified?
Yes, I am.
And what are you board certified in?
General adult psychiatry and consultation liaison psychiatry is a subspecialty.
Okay. So you have 2 board
Yes.
certifications. Okay. Can you explain to the jury what's involved in board certifications in those 2 fields?
So board certification is the standard we strive to in being a physician or any other mental health practitioner. It involves taking a very comprehensive test at the beginning of your career to initiate board certification. Then you get tested again every 10 years. Then you have to go through continual medical education throughout the entire period. You have to do what's called performance in practice, which is basically ways to improve things in your practice. And again, this occurs always throughout the years.
Okay. Now, are you a member of any professional organizations?
Yes, I am.
Could you
I'm
please
a
tell the
member
jury?
of the American Psychiatric Association, as well as the fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. I'm a member of the Medical Society of Virginia. I'm a member of the Psychiatric Society of Virginia. I'm a member of the Tidewater Academy of Psychiatry, and I'm a member of the Academy of Consultation Liaison Psychiatry.
Do you have any teaching responsibilities?
Teaching, oh yeah.
Teaching, yes.
So yes, so teaching is a daily occurrence as part of my job when I do my inpatient rounds. Residents, medical students, physician assistant students are assigned. So we round together, and there's teaching with every single encounter. In addition to that, I teach lectures to the residents, to the third, second, and first year medical students, as well as a fourth year medical student lecture as well. So I'm constantly teaching.
Have you engaged in any hands-on training of psychiatrists practicing in Virginia?
Hands-on training with the residents?
With psychiatrists?
Oh yeah, so again, I'm teaching at bedside. I mean, we don't speak in front of the patient, obviously, but I'm teaching at bedside, meaning after we see a patient, we discuss the important points to learn. And again, that includes residents at every level. That includes medical students, third, second, and first year physician assistant students. So every day is a teaching explanation session to the students and residents.
What is your role at Eastern Virginia Medical School as the acting chair? Please tell the jury what that means.
So as the acting chair, you are not only accountable for your own practice, but you are accountable for your faculty members' practices. So I have to make sure that everyone is treating, seeing, evaluating a certain number of patients. I have responsible for their academic requirements, so in terms of publishing, et cetera. I'm responsible for their teaching assignments to other residents, to other students. I'm responsible for fiscally that they are accountable to their fiscal productivity. So, and a heck of a lot of other administrative meetings that I go to.
Have you published in your field?
To the tune of about 80 manuscripts, and I have my own book on catatonia, the consultation liaison setting. I have a book chapter on the current and current and contemporary approaches temporomandibular disease, at least the psychiatric portion. I'm also in a dissociative identity disorders chapter on a wiki book.
And have you peer-reviewed literature?
Yes, so
Okay, we get it. He's qualified. Holy shit!
I've served as a reviewer
My God.
on Lancet. I've served as a reviewer as
Yeah, they're making him qualified. We get it.
Innovations
Like
in,
at some point, it
clinical
gets kind of annoying.
neuroscience. I've served on reviewer for clinical neuropharmacology, and I'm actually editor-in-chief of, at this point.
I'm mad. This
clinical
always gets kind of annoying.
Have you lectured on the effects of drugs and alcohol on the human brain?
Yes, I teach to the residents. I teach lecture to the second-year medical students, third-year medical students. So I am fully aware of not only what I teach, but what I see in the emergency room and the consultation and inpatient settings.
Have you published and lectured on the causes and effects of intimate partner abuse?
Yes, I punctured, I believe, 2 articles on the effects of trauma, and in that trauma was intimate partner violence.
Are you familiar with the hallmarks of intimate partner violence?
Yes.
Are you familiar with what causes intimate partner violence?
One more, excuse me?
What causes intimate partner violence?
Yes, there's a multiple explanation that cause intimate partner violence. And if I can I just mention at this point too, that when we are discussing intimate partner violence, I think it's imperative for the jury to know we are talking about repetitive behavior over periods of time. And the type of abuse can be any physical, psychological, sexual, but just as important is for somebody, one of the partners, to maintain some uneven element of control or to maintain power, control, or authority. So there are a lot of facets to intimate partner violence. I know people tend to think of it as just the actual abuse act, but there's more to it than just the actual abuse act. Abuse act's important, but it's not the sole thing.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'd move to qualify Dr. Spiegel as an expert in the field of psychiatry and behavioral sciences with specific emphasis on drug and alcohol abuse, intimate partner violence, and the effect of these as they pertain to the issues in this case.
All right, any objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
You wish to voir dire?
I do.
Okay. To his qualifications.
His qualification.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, the objective is qualifications.
So you talked about 2 board certifications, general adult psychiatry
Yes.
and liaison consultation psychiatry.
Other way around, but consultation liaison.
psychiatry.
Subtle point.
Right. Now, that is not intimate partner violence. That deals with a issue of comorbidity between people who have medical problems and health problems.
So you're saying it's subspecialty.
Yes.
So consultation liaison psychiatry does have that, but you're also treating patients who have medical illness, who have comorbid psychiatric illness, or people who have psychiatric illness that have comorbid medical illness. And many of the patients that I see on the trauma service have tried to take their own life. And unfortunately, as part of that, intimate partner violence and trauma in general is part and parcel of that. So it's very, very narrow to say it's just the medical psychiatric interface. It's much more of psychiatric patients who need medical help, medical patients develop psychiatric problems, but also that interface.
So as a subset of your trauma patients, which you say are about 50% of your practice, as a subset of that practice, some people have been involved with intimate partner violence.
So as a subset of my overall practice, 50% have suffered from trauma, about half of that number have suffered from, I'm sorry, about 20, so it's 20, about 20% that suffer from IP, intimate partner violence.
All right. You've never conducted any empirical research on individuals who experienced intimate partner violence, have you, sir?
If your definition is trials, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Like pharmaceutical trials, or what are you saying? Is that what you're saying? Because I've done review articles on patients who suffered from trauma. So the answer is, I haven't done any studies like where you give them medication for treatment or try one treatment versus another.
What?
I've reviewed the
What's
body
happening?
of literature on intimate partner violence to get 2 review articles, yes.
So you've read about it, is what you just testified to.
I would have to disagree with you on that, sir. Reading about it and writing a review article are completely 2 different things, sir.
All right. You haven't authored any articles specifically on IPV, have you, sir?
As a subset of trauma, the answer is yes. In terms of in the name of the title of the article, the answer is no.
You've never written any books specifically on IPV?
I've never written any books on IPV, although temporomandibular disease, okay, in terms of psychiatric issues, does have a higher frequency in those patients who have suffered from trauma, including intimate partner violence.
You've never.
And I am part of that book.
Okay. Temporal mandibular disease deals with problems with the jaw.
Is that a question, sir?
What is temporal
No,
mandibular?
temporomandibular disease is a problem with oral issues, yeah, but there are many patients who complain of oral issues where the oral surgeon cannot find a reason for it, and the reason why they can't is because people who have suffered from trauma and intimate partner violence are prone to increased sensitivity of somatic sensations, which can manifest in temporomandibular disease. Thank you, I appreciate that. Nice plug for my book, too, thank you.
Didn't hear it, but there we go. So, you haven't written any chapters of any books.
What the fuck is that?
Specifically about IPV.
Again, I think I've gone over that. I've written 2 articles on that, and I've written parts of chapters. And dissociative identity disorder, I should add, where I did write a chapter on, is completely based on trauma and intimate partner violence.
Right. I'm not asking you about trauma because you want to talk about trauma. I'm asking you about IPV specifically.
I will reiterate again, you cannot separate intimate partner violence and say that is a separate rubric aside from trauma. Trauma is overall, intimate partner violence is part of trauma, and the answer to the question is any individual who suffers from a dissociative
It's an umbrella
disorder, which
term.
I am the author of a chapter of, suffers from trauma, whether it be at the hands of childhood or it be at the hands
It's an umbrella.
of an intimate partner.
Right.
trauma,
You've already testified that
IPV.
half your practice is trauma and a subset of that practice is IPV, correct?
Which is actually I treat the national average of patients. About 20% of patients suffer from it, and that's about my practice number.
Except you're discounting the fact that half your practice is not trauma at all. So 10% of your practice is IPV.
I don't know if the numbers add up exactly like that.
I'm just using yours.
I don't know if I'm doing. I don't know if those numbers add up like that because
Well,
I'm not sure if that's
50
the case. If you say
and 20,
25%,
I
then
mean-
maybe 12.5% of my practice. That's being rather specific. So again, a significant number of my patients have suffered from intimate partner violence. I see it on a daily basis, and I'm not sure exactly why I'm getting asked the same question again. Thank
Okay.
you, sir.
You listed 60 references to articles. I guess you said 80 now, and publications.
I said around. Sorry, I said around 80. I said around 80.
60, 80, whatever it is, right?
No, 60 and 80 is not. If you go to the PubMed, actually, you can go to PubMed right now and Google, not Google.
Oh,
PubMed,
no, this guy.
Google DR, and you'll find that number is 72 with 2 waves being pressed,
no.
1 submitted, so that'd be 75. So it's at around 80. So again, what's on my CV is not necessarily the most updated version because I still publish since the CV's been.
Who inquired about
given
this?
to you, sir.
Right. And not one of the 72, 80 articles has IPV in the title, right?
Correct. Not one of them has IPV. It does have trauma, but not IPV.
Right. And you've never presented on the topic of IPV specifically.
As a function of trauma and as a function of somatic illness, again, I would say to you that it's part and parcel of these illnesses. So the answer is yes, I have. Okay.
All right.
The answer is yes, I have.
And IPV doesn't
Oh, no.
appear in your CV at all.
If you say it's not in my CV, I will believe you.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that are not in my CV that I do. So.
Oh no.
And you're not associated with any professional literature on IPV.
I'm sorry, repeat the question, sir?
Is there any professional literature that you've contributed to relative to IPV specifically as opposed to trauma generally?
The objection is not gonna
The
pass.
answer to
but
the
still.
question again, sir, is that you cannot separate this artificial separation you are trying to do between trauma and intimate partner violence. It is part and parcel of trauma. We don't thread it like that.
Your Honor, plaintiff would accept this witness as an expert on general psychiatry, and with respect to the drug usage issues that Ms. Bredehoff referenced, but not with respect to IPV.
All right, over objection, he's entered as an expert as stated on the record. All right, you may continue. Thank you.
Very much, Your Honor.
Wow, they actually won that.
Dr. Spiegel, at our request, what have you reviewed in this case? And just go ahead and give me more.
So
give
it's,
the jury more
it's a
general.
lengthy review, but court filings, psychological testing that was done on Ms. Heard by both Dr. Hughes and Dr. Curry,
Ego smoked on.
other physicians' medical records, other physician note, Dr. Kipper, counselors and therapists that both parties and psychiatrists that they went to, text messages, depositions, snippets of the UK trial,
Overruled? No.
and I'm sure pictures of physical injuries. So I've seen a lot.
What, if anything, have you seen in terms of emails, audios, videos? things-
Yes, so I've seen the
You don't get it.
videos of Mr. Depp. I think the video was showing Ray of Mr. Depp destroying, slamming cupboards and breaking glass and yelling at Miss Heard while having a wine glass in his
At Miss
wine
Heard?
in his hands. I've seen videos of destruction of property in the house.
Okay. And
Destruction
what,
of
if any,
property.
review have you conducted of the deposition and testimony of Mr. Depp's hired witness, Dr. Curry?
Objection.
Sure.
Okay, from one understanding, they went over it really fast. So, they wanted him to be a professional, an expert in the field of psychiatry, and an expert in IPV or whatever. So what they said at the end was that he is qualified to speak as an expert of psychiatry, right? But no IPV specification past that point, correct? So he was kind of like disqualified as an expert. So I think he's just being petty. I think everybody can agree to this. I think him speaking as an expert of psychiatry and him not as an additional expert of IPV doesn't really matter to the jury or anybody at all. It just doesn't. It doesn't really do anything for anybody. It's just really fucking petty. But it got him mauled. Now he's dude. He's actually schmolding. No, it doesn't. It barely discredits him. I think that his questions initially were good enough, that they did enough damage. Okay, this is my opinion. I think his earlier questions that diminish his expertise in that field, in a way, to me, if I was in a jury, I did feel like it struck the point that, like, you know what? Actually, I'm not even being biased about it. I don't think this guy is, from what they're saying in the questions or how they framed it, he's a massive IPV centralized expert. I get it. It's part of an umbrella. It's part of his field. It's just people that go through it and have it, but he doesn't hardcore specialize in that specifically.
Do you remember my question? Did you review the deposition and testimony of Dr. Curry?
Because you can't. I'm sure you.
Yes, I've reviewed Dr. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, so I reviewed testimony of Dr. Curry. I reviewed Dr. Curry's reports. I reviewed Dr. Curry's testimony.
Okay, and what if did you review the deposition and trial testimony of Dr. Hughes?
It does matter.
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of the disclosure.
I'll allow that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Did you interview Mr. Depp?
No, I did not.
Did you
But-
request to
I
interview?
requested to interview Mr. Depp twice, and both times Mr. Depp and his lawyers refused.
Fanboy.
Dr. Spiegel, I'm going to ask you some questions in this case respecting your opinions and the opinions you have formed and the bases for them. And I'm going to ask you to provide me with, in a reasonable degree of medical probability or certainty. Can you do that?
Yes.
Okay. On what were you requested to analyze and opine in this case?
So it's fourfold. One, I was asked to opine about the risk factors that are associated with intimate partner violence and behaviors that are shown, risk factors that are shown in intimate partner violence to be consistent with behaviors that Mr. Depp has demonstrated. Two, I've been asked to opine about the acute effects on alcohol and substance use, and I mentioned that including mood, behavior, cognition, functional impairment. Three, talking about the psychological profile, if you would, of, is there a question? I'm sorry. Oh.
No.
Okay. Of psychological and medical sequelae of patients who have suffered intimate partner violence and perpetrate intimate partner violence, and whether or not Mr. Depp's behavior is consistent with that. And lastly, about alcohol and other substance use disorders, their diagnostic criteria, their medical and psychological effects, psychiatric effects, their cognitive effects, and their functional effects. And I think I would like to just go with the jury one other thing. When we talk about, when psychiatry talks about substance use disorders, it's imperative to understand we're not talking about someone who rarely uses and happens to have a bad night. We're not talking about someone who uses on a weekly basis and has a bad night. We're talking about repetitive patterns of behavior.
One bad night is all it
meet
takes.
a list of 11 criteria that could be deemed mild, moderate, or severe. Because I think people get confused when they hear the word substance abuse.
You want to know how I
that
got
they
this
think that,
degree?
Oh, I may have used this because I used it twice. There is a whole criteria of behavior and
that's
sequelae and
Purgation's joke.
consequences that go with a substance use disorder. I'm not just talking about someone who will occasionally smoke a joint or smokes a joint or snorts occasionally coke, okay, or has alcohol on weekends. So I really need to reiterate that, because I think when you look at psychiatric behavior, we tend to people look online and say, my gosh, I have all 7 of these, right? And they're reading it not quite the way the psychiatric literature is supposed to go. So please, when I'm talking about this, I need you to understand, one, that's what's going on. As I told you about intimate partner violence, it's horrible that anyone would strike anyone, okay? But again, we're talking about repetitive behaviors for means of control, right? So that's real important to understand when you're moving forward. And I may say occasionally substance abuse, but what I'm referring to is substance
Objection
use.
beyond the scope of the question.
I don't,
Sustained. Next question.
okay.
Yeah.
Dr.
He's
Spiegel,
rambling.
could you please just summarize for the jury the conclusions you came to with your opinions, and then we'll take you through the specifics.
So in my opinion, based on my a review of the evidence, based on my clinical experience, based on my publishing experience, based on my teaching experience, that Mr. Depp has behaviors that are consistent with both someone who has a substance use disorder as well as consistent behaviors for someone who's a perpetrator of intimate partner violence.
Thank you.
The evidence.
I'm going to start with the impact of
Sir?
drug and alcohol abuse over time. First of all, based upon your review of the record evidence, what type of drugs has Mr. Depp used?
So Mr. Depp, and I'm talking about use, we're talking about a substance use disorder here. We're not just talking about use, okay? So we are talking about
Trust me, bro.
alcohol. We are talking about amphetamines. We are talking about marijuana. We are talking about cocaine. We are talking about LSD. We are talking about ecstasy. We are talking about opiates. We are talking about prescription benzodiazepines. And we'll get into a separate thing about the abusability of Seroquel and or gabapentin in Iran. And we are talking about much of the time concurrent use, meaning simultaneously.
In your practice, do some patients suggest to you that drugs and alcohol actually help them?
So I think it's patients who lack insight or are in the very early stages of recognizing they have a quote unquote problem will sometimes actually say that they have this medication actually calms me down. This medication makes me feel better. And in actuality, they may not acutely feel anything, but chronic and continual use will take its toll on the brain. So the answer is yes, but again, people who have substance use disorders have lack of insight and a lack of judgment about what's going on. They're very poor moderators of their own behavior.
Has Mr. Depp suggested, based on your review of the record evidence, that alcohol and drugs actually help him?
Yes, in a review of the evidence, he has suggested that alcohol, Xanax, I'm in the list of medications, do help. Although I will also tell you on review of the evidence that there were at least 2 times I can remember that Mr. Depp was referring to at least short-lived periods of sobriety, and I cannot exactly tell you what that included. That both times he said that he functioned better and that he recognized that alcohol and drugs was at the root of his problems.
Now, there's been testimony that Mr. Depp is quite charming, both off and on the drugs and the alcohol. What is your answer to that?
So, again, let me put one thing clear here. I am not here to impeach Mr. Depp's acting skills or his persona. He has way greater skills than I do in that. What I'm here to say is talk about how drugs and alcohol affect what we all have in common. We're all human beings. We can all only get so much, take so much when something is going to happen. And that's what I see every day in the emergency room, on the consult service, on inpatient psychiatry. Bad things happen, not because of anything special, except we're all human beings and our brains, substance of abuse, are not titrated.
My man needs some water
by the FDA.
and a new script.
We don't know what we're getting. We don't know how much we're getting. There is no control over what makes it to our brain. So it is not the actor. It is not the persona, okay? It is a person just like the rest of us who are human beings who will have these effects, and that's what we all share in common. Everyone in this courtroom shares that in common.
When Mr. Depp was in his relationship with Amber Heard, was he a polysubstance abuser?
Was he in what substance abuse?
Polysubstance
Yes.
abuser?
So
Can you explain
leaving
to
your-
what that is?
Overruled.
I mean, overruled. They already said that.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
He already said that.
Okay, so polysubstance abuse
He said
is
a lot
the use
of-
of
and-
3 or
and
more
combine-
substances. And I answer, like I said, concurrently, he was. Even while I was getting ready for rehab on the island, he was. So, yes, he did engage in that.
Did Mr. Depp's drug and alcohol abuse affect him cognitively?
Yes. So
No, nobody.
If nothing else to look at, Dr. Blaustein, a psychiatrist that evaluated Mr. Depp, did a mini mental state exam on him. And as part of that mini mental state examination, you're asked to remember 3 words and then come back 5 minutes later and repeat those 3 words. And in the meanwhile, you're getting other types of testing for attention and concentration and visual, spatial, and language. So other things that are being tested too. Mr. Depp was unable to recall any of them. And that is very unusual for a 50-ish year old male. I don't remember how old he was when he took that. Generally speaking, that age group should be remembering 2 or all 3 of those words. One, I do know that his lines were also fed to him by earpiece. Again, affecting memory. I did see in video deposition about having to have questions, I don't want to say repeat as much as completely forgotten. So the answer is yes. And you know, any one of us who use alcohol and cocaine to that level of degree, and I'm talking about a severe level of substance use disorder, are going to have effects. It is inescapable because we all have brains that are malaffected by extensive substance use, and potentially sometimes less.
If he didn't
But certainly
examine
we're talking
Depp
about years
personally,
extensive.
why is he drawing medical conclusions
What if
based on
any,
2 random
Anthony,
things?
Did you observe from the record evidence about Mr. Depp having difficulty focusing, his attention span, processing, whether he could function as an actor?
So
Objection compound.
Compound is only if it's
Overruled.
Thank you.
He has an earpiece
So,
for his
again,
lines.
in terms of the acting
drugs.
part, we do know that he needed his lines fed to him for movies. Part of that could have been also due to, and
See?
I don't know which movie, and please forgive me about that he actually confessed he did a movie entirely wasted. So I imagine it would be harder to do that. Additionally, like I said, when I looked at deposition, you can tell that the processing speed was down. His thinking rate was down. If your thinking rate is down, and I'm not talking about, again, I'm getting older. I'm probably not as sharp as I was at 25, okay? But I'm talking about so slow that when we're trying to move on to other questions, we're still trying to answer the original data that's presented to us. So attention span is very much impaired. And if your attention span is impaired, your memory is going to be impaired. It is inescapable that that's going to happen. So all that comes into play, and that's what I witnessed in the video deposition. Fortunately,
Ironic.
for Mr. Depp, I do see that during this trial,
That's what he's been doing.
his cognition has improved somewhat, which will happen if you are sober. So I commend him on that.
Says
But
you.
again, I'm specifically referencing the time with Ms. Heard's and Mr. Depp's relationship. So we're talking about that.
What, if any, observations from the record evidence did you have about Mr. Depp having alcoholic blackouts or foggy mind?
Again, there were reported times where he would be essentially, quote unquote, passed out drunk. You saw pictures of him passed out drunk and not be able to remember what he did, which is, again, if you look at the record evidence, you will see that and this is linking intimate partner violence and substance use together. I know we're going to get to that.
Who asked?
Which is basically, if you have blackouts and you're using alcohol or using cocaine, it's going to be near impossible to remember what happened the night before. I don't think I'm the first person that's ever told you that alcohol can cause blackouts. And basically, alcohol decreases a brain chemical, glutamate, which is involved in memory formation. If it blocks that to an extensive degree, the individual cannot remember what happened because they didn't have enough time.
What about in combination with cocaine, though?
Process the memory. You need this brain chemical. So, does alcoholic blackouts happen every time? No, of course not. But are they a complication of a use disorder? Absolutely yes. And there was record evidence.
Does cocaine not cut through that a little
Dr.
bit?
Spiegel, you said at one point alcohol and cocaine. Is it possible to have blackouts with alcohol and different types of substances?
Yes.
I think it kind of does.
My clinical experience, and I'll date it back within the last month. We had a patient who was using both, especially cocaine, and she had these kind of stroke-like lesions around the brain center known as the hippocampus, which is involved in memory formation. So
Objection, relevance.
Just giving an example.
Overruled.
Combining the two substances together increases the likelihood, even if you don't get what is a major stroke. And again, we think of a major stroke as someone who has speech difficulties and movement difficulties. There's a lot of different types of stroke that can just affect cognition. They don't necessarily have to have severe movement deficits or severe language deficits. They can solely affect you in terms of your cognitive symptoms, and actually known as a vascular neurocognitive disorder. So,
oh my God, get some water, man.
That's part of the psychiatric diagnosis. You need to understand that you can have these insults, these lesions, these strokes, without demonstrating physical features. And at a minimal, we know that he was using both substances concurrently, and at minimum, we know he has cognitive issues that we talked about, or at least had some of them.
Thank you, Dr. Spiegel. What, if any, correlation is there between domestic abuse, heavy alcohol abuse, and cognitive disorders?
So, the risk factors, if you would, for intimate partner violence.
You're like 50x?
Okay, and there are probably many of them. I don't have time to go over all of them, but the ones in particular, characters in particular, are one, having someone in the relationship who is jealous or suspicious. Two, having someone who has a higher than average acceptance of violence ideations. Three, someone who has rapid and extreme mood shifts. Four, someone who has limited self-control. One of the roles of cognition, one of the roles of our brain,
It's a free TED
is
Talk.
to prevent inappropriate behaviors and acting out on thoughts. We all get angry at people. That's human. We all get angry at people. We all think things about people. The difference is when our brains are intact and working well, most of us don't act them out. Okay? Most of us do not act them out. So that's because your frontal lobe and other parts of the brain are involved in making sure these negative thoughts don't get acted on. Okay? So, when you have the effects of alcohol acutely, it causes disinhibition, which means you are, by definition, losing control and having rapid mood swings. Two, you are affecting parts of the brain that are involved in what we call social processing clues.
He's going to get mad during cross.
So
I can already tell.
You no longer can interpret what's in front of you that is, I would say,
Cross
right or
will
wrong,
never let
what
him do
I should
that.
act on and what I shouldn't act on. So we act on them, even though sober, and I've seen it in with Mr. Depp's record evidence. I've seen it clinically.
can't cross them.
Sober, we can contain that.
Why not?
We can contain that. But when you have these mixtures together, knowing, by the way, that about 40 up to 60% of intimate partner violence is done under the influence of alcohol and or substance use disorders, okay? Knowing that treating it gets it better, improves, I'm not saying it removes it, but improves it. Hearing from Mr. Depp's own text to Dr. Kipper that he was better with that things are going better, will show you that given those confluence of factors, given them all lining up, the risk factors, combined with something that when any of us use to a certain amount, if we're novice at it, it'll be
trying to be
a lot
so
less.
relatable. It's,
If we're more experienced and have more tolerance and dependence, it's going to take a lot more, but inevitably will make us disinhibited and will make us
tiring.
act
Just
out. And
get-
acting
move
out
on, man.
can be done in a lot of different ways in intimate partner violence, okay? With also remembering control is the end game of intimate partner violence. So that's how they basically interact in a nutshell.
he's playing Clash Royale. He's
so we have-
doodling.
I have quite a bit more.
Let's go ahead.
This
and
guy
take
doesn't know what he's doing
morning
anymore.
Recess, ladies and gentlemen. Just do not discuss the case and don't do any outside research.
Judge
We'll be back
got
with you.
bored. She's gonna want to go watch TV.
15 minutes.
Like,
We're
fuck,
just taking a
man.
break. No, we're just taking a break.
This guy, look. What the fuck?
All right, let's just take a break till 11 then, and we'll come back at 11, okay?
Thank you, Anna.
Christ. Okay. Stop toasting him. Imagine he was your dad. Sag. Guys, what the fuck is this emote? That's not even real. Stop toasting him. Imagine he was your dad. Sag nicotine abuser. That is not an emote, dude. That does not exist. What the fuck is that? Oh, it's a chatter. I thought it was an emote. Christ. What is this? Amber new expert Dr. Spiegel is apparently accused of driving. The expert. We can't.